You are listening to 91.7 FM, WSUW, in Whitewater, Wisconsin. You're listening to WSUW 91.7 The Edge in Whitewater, Wisconsin, the Rashkin Report, and this is Yuri Rashkin. And my returning guest today is one of the most well-known Russian bloggers, Slava Rabinovich. Slava, welcome back. How are you?
Thank you, Yuri. Hello. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. The news out of Russia continues to, I think, come out fast and furious, and I don't know if any of it is really good. I guess the first thing that I would like to get your take on is this report that's been released on the leader of Chechen Republic, Ramzan Kadyrov, because it's quite... there was quite a production around it, and so I was wondering what you thought about it.
Well, my initial take was that the report came out to be completely not unexpected to those people who followed the latest and not as late development with Chechnya and the so-called leader of Chechnya, who is just the Kremlin-sponsored thug who abuses the powers that were entrusted to him by Putin personally. That was the deal between Putin and Kadyrov, which allowed Putin to gain initial score points in his political career to end the so-called Russian-Chechen War back 15 years ago in exchange for Kadyrov gaining unlimited powers in Chechnya and protecting and getting onto his side an army of those separatists that fought the federal forces during the previous two wars with Chechnya. However, the resulting regime in Chechnya is something which can be called as a feudal, completely independent state that does not conform to anything which may have to do with the Russian Constitution and with the laws of the Russian Federation. We are talking about 16th, 17th century feudal state with
You're there?
power.
All right.
Yes, with the absolute concentration of power in the hands of a criminal. That is what the report is about.
It's true, and the exchange has been another example of, it sounds like, of Putin's tactical abilities and strategic, perhaps, failure, is that he felt that he was solving this one problem, and then the Mr. Kadyrov got entirely out of control, including engaging in murders of prominent individuals, including most notably Boris Nemtsov, who was killed almost a year ago. And do you feel that that there's this disbalance, the power struggle between the Kremlin and the Chechens, is that something that is going to continue to develop, or is this something that perhaps Kremlin has effectively lost by surrendering to Ramzan Kadyrov's power and well-armed troops? I mean, I've seen the report that was put out by Novaya Gazeta online, and the pictures of these Kadyrov's troops are quite impressive. I mean, there's this one gentleman with a really small head but really huge biceps, and apparently they've won competitions of special forces worldwide. So these are well-trained, well-armed troops. that are perhaps being used to scare the population into, fearful submission because these guys can come in and just start mowing people down. Are they effectively stronger than the KGB or FSB or whatever else there is now? What do you think?
Well, it is obviously an unconstitutional precedent where the so-called leader of a region in the Russian Federation has a private army, and the private army is not reported to. It's not reporting to anybody of a commander of chief sort of leader in Moscow, such as the commander-in-chief in capacity of the president or the internal ministry head or the minister of defense or anything. They report directly to Kadyrov. It is a private army. And obviously, as you just stated, it's a very capable force. The lost or any other state of war between the federal center and Chechnya in this respect is still open-ended question, but it obviously, the situation represents a huge threat, as it was clearly stated in the report, a clear threat to the national security of the Russian Federation from any standpoint, from the standpoint of the FSB, of the Kremlin, of the opposition leaders, of anybody who understands the situation. There is a clear deal which rests on two individuals. There are no institutions in Russia which allow the Russian constitution to be supported by some sort of a constitutional process of democratic or semi-democratic process. There is no such mechanism. We are hanging here on a string of individual of multiple individual deals, but in this respect, on the individual deal of two individuals, Putin and Kadyrov, and the regime in Chechnya is basically the result of that deal. In the early days, Putin tried to put perhaps some checks and balances into this power balance by installing the president of Chechnya and some other leaders who were of the opposite camp to Kadyrov, but Kadyrov figured that out very quickly. He basically put them aside, and at the same time, with the iron grip of a dictator, got Chechnya into his feudal state of running the region, such that Putin thought to himself, okay, it seems like this way it is working, so let me go with this regime and let it be there. And based on that, it turned out in a something of an unconstitutional region within the Russian Federation, with feudal laws and feudal way of living running for over 10 years by now. And this is clearly regarded by many as a lost war, that the Second Chechen War was lost by the Russian Federation. And it is not that Russia added Chechnya to its territory, or made Chechnya to remain within Russian Federation. It was the other way around. Chechnya added Russian Federation to Chechnya, and Russia continues to pay for that in exchange for the so-called peace, and in exchange for de facto Chechnya independence.
That is an interesting point. As you mentioned, it basically, rather than Russia adding or keeping Chechnya, it's Chechnya that added Russia to its, almost power. Because with this, well-regulated militia that Kadyrov has, they are now infiltrating. They're quite involved in Moscow. They're not just in Chechnya. They're all over the place. And one of the things that the report that was released by Boris Nemtsov's close ally, Mr. Yashin, detailed is just to what extent these warriors become leaders of organized crime. How is life in Moscow and in Russia, but this report just basically outlines it. How is living there because of it? Is it matter, or is this just another crime group,
Well, you don't see too much of a random crime committed by the Chechens that is visible on the streets of Moscow or St. Petersburg or other big cities. But obviously, the Chechens control many businesses and act as a mafia or protection mafia. For private businesses, they obviously are following the orders of their master, of Ramzan Kadyrov. In this respect, they harass the opposition leaders. They recently smashed a huge cake into the face of Mikhail Kasyanov, who not only was a finance minister, but was in fact the prime minister of Russia, and the most successful prime minister of Russia in between 2000 and 2004. He is now is one of the opposition leaders. He is the only surviving chairman of the so-called Parnas party, which is a well-known opposition political party, and the why I'm saying the only surviving chairman is because the co-chairman of this party, Boris Nemtsov, was gunned down a year ago by the killers who directly reported to Ramzan Kadyrov, and the investigation 1 year later is sabotaged by Putin personally, because there is only one person in the world who can sabotage this investigation. The killers, the murderers who pulled the trigger, they are in custody and they will be put on trial. They used to report to Kadyrov on duty. They were on-duty officers of the internal forces of the Russian Federation stationed in Chechnya, doing whatever they were doing in Moscow. But these were only the killers hired by the organizers, and who in turn were hired by those who ordered the killing. So the investigation 1 year on does not name the organizers and those who ordered. The investigation, I'm sure, would have been able to publicly name these people. And the only person who could possibly sabotage this killing is actually Putin personally. So he is protecting Kadyrov in this situation. And 1 year on, Kadyrov and his thugs, they are active in social media. They put threatening messages on their personal pages in social media, including Kadyrov's personal Instagram page. The recent video of Mikhail Kasyanov, this former prime minister, that was a video of him and another activist from the same political party. They were in the video clip on
they were pictured
Instagram.
in crosshairs of a gun, so they were
exactly.
Yes.
And a few days later, Kasyanov is sitting in a Moscow restaurant, and then the armed Chechens walk in like this is the picture that you would not see in any of American restaurants unless you watch some horror, Hollywood horror movies. You see the Chechens walking into a restaurant, and they smash a huge cake into Kasyanov's face, a person who wears glasses, and they are not afraid of anything. They keep on videotaping this, and they spend a few more seconds in front of cameras. They walk out of the restaurant not being arrested by anybody, and this is done in broad daylight with no repercussions. Kadyrov himself in social media calls opposition leaders as traitors and enemies of the people in the best traditions, quote unquote, of Stalinist terror of 1930s, and this all smells very, very bad.
It does. That's a kind of almost funny, because I would imagine the cake probably wasn't smelling bad, but the situation is awful. And what I'm trying to figure out with all of these, situations that you're describing, there's this constant conflict between the federal center and the Chechens. And can Chechens do whatever they want or not? And is Kadyrov now the ultimate boogeyman that is almost like, probably not to give too much credit to Mr. Trump, but over here, when we watch Trump, we go, wow, he said another outrageous thing. Well, surely this time people are going to notice, and he's going to, and then nothing happens. And in a different way, Ramzan Kadyrov does seemingly almost whatever he wants, and he doesn't get pulled back by his boss. Does it mean that his boss likes this and likes Mr. Kadyrov being out there and threatening everyone? Or does it mean that Mr. Putin perhaps lost control?
Yuri, I would not compare Kadyrov to Mr. Trump. I remember Mr. Trump in media and out there in the spotlight since I immigrated to the United States back in 1989. I then became a finance professional some 20 years ago, and even moving back to Russia, I continued watching the likes of Bloomberg Television and CNBC, and I watched the so-called Trump Tuesdays on CNBC. He obviously likes to be of an appetite, like somebody who says many outrageous things and thinking out of the box. If you're talking about his CNBC regular interviews, but he is not breaking the U.S. law. You cannot sue Trump for a criminal offense on a daily basis or any other basis. And Kadyrov is a criminal. He can be sued based on Russian laws, not tomorrow and not today. He should have been sued a very long time ago. He is a criminal. He is a thug. This is not a fair comparison, really. In terms of whether Putin lost it, I don't know whether it's fair maybe for you and I to believe that Putin lost it, but maybe Putin doesn't think that he lost it. We don't know exactly what Putin thinks. He is in his a world that may be very, very far away from reality.
But you don't take this as an indication of Putin's weakness necessarily.
Of course, I take it. When Putin is trying to portray himself as, if not the most powerful man in the world, then at least as powerful as the U.S. president, many people around the world would question this at a time when Putin may be viewed as not the most powerful person in Russia.
You're listening to Rashkin Report.